for endless weeks. Not a single remedy, fairy tale, or renowned specialist had managed to quell the tempest that raged in the small hearts of the twins, preventing them from finding sleep. Their nights were a constant lament, an echo of despair that reverberated through the grand mansion until the unexpected arrival of a new nanny. With her aura of tranquility and a wisdom that belied her youth, her presence set in motion something extraordinary. This chance encounter would unleash a series of events that not only transformed the chaotic household, but also began to blur the rigid lines of their father's life. A man who had built an empire but found himself adrift on the sea of his own paternity, unable to navigate the turbulent waters of childhood sorrow, or find a calm harbor for the storm that ravaged his own soul, a storm that, unbeknownst to him, yearned for a single ray of sun. "I can't go on like this, sir." "Mendoza!" exclaimed Camilla, the third nanny to resign in less than a month, her voice trembling. Her eyes, a mixture of immense exhaustion and frustration, darted around as she gathered her belongings with an almost feverish haste. "The children don't sleep, they don't obey, and frankly, they need a kind of help that, with all my effort and experience, I am unable to provide. This situation is unsustainable. It has far surpassed my capabilities, leaving me utterly drained and without any hope for a change." Upstairs, the desolate, high-pitched cries of the 4-year-old twins, Elio and Enzo, pierced the thick walls of the imposing mansion. It stood in Polanco, the most exclusive and ostentatious neighborhood in Mexico City, a place where luxury and opulence collided with the emotional disarray of a family struggling to find peace. Ramiro Mendoza, a 38-year-old man who had forged a real estate empire from nothing, rubbed his temples with overwhelming weariness. He watched the woman leave, trapped in his own powerlessness, unable to offer a solution. "Please, Camilla, just one more week," he pleaded, his voice hoarse from sleep deprivation, revealing the profound exhaustion of a man who had forgotten the feeling of a full night's rest. "I'll raise your salary, whatever it takes." But the nanny, with unshakable resolve, simply shook her head as she closed her suitcase. "It's not about the money, sir," she replied firmly, her voice soft but laden with conviction. "Your sons need stability. They need—" She stopped abruptly, biting her tongue to keep from saying what she was thinking. "They need their mother," Ramiro completed the sentence in his mind, as if he could erase the painful truth. But the escalating cries from upstairs were a constant reminder, intensifying the weight of his grief and his ever-present sense of failure. Ramiro closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, searching for a calm that felt unreachable. At 38, he had built a real estate empire from the ground up, negotiating with the toughest and most ruthless businessmen in Latin America, facing colossal financial challenges, and overcoming obstacles that would have broken any other man. Yet, in that moment, he felt completely disarmed and helpless before two small 4-year-olds who simply could not sleep through the night. Their incessant crying had become the soundtrack to his personal failure. "I understand," he said finally, a resignation heavy on his soul. "Gabriel will see you're paid through the end of the month." When Camilla had gone, Ramiro slowly ascended the marble staircase, each step heavier than the last, as if he carried the weight of his own frustration and that of his sons. He found Elio and Enzo on their bedroom floor, submerged in a sea of scattered toys, their identical faces streaked with inconsolable tears. The sight squeezed his heart, a familiar pang of pain at his inability to ease their anguish. "Daddy, we want Mommy," Helio sobbed. The twin who, with his innate spontaneity, was always the first to speak, voicing the pain they both shared. "Mommy used to sing to us," Enzo added, clutching a worn teddy bear, seeking comfort in the object that represented his mother's absent presence. Ramiro knelt beside them, oblivious to how his impeccable, $1,000 Italian suit wrinkled against the cold floor. It was an insignificant concern next to the profound sadness of his children. "I know, little ones," Ramiro said, gently drawing them into his chest, trying to convey all the comfort and love he felt, even though he knew no words could fill the void they felt. "I know." That night, like all the nights for months before, Ramiro spent endless hours trying to get the twins to sleep. He read them stories in a voice that, though he tried, lacked the warmth of a lullaby, accustomed as he was to giving orders in the world of business. He even lay down between them in the enormous, custom-made children's bed, hoping his presence would bring them security. But nothing worked. Their insomnia persisted, and Ramiro's desperation grew with each passing minute. At 3 in the morning, when they finally surrendered to exhaustion and silence fell over the room, Ramiro returned to his office. He sank his face into his hands, feeling utterly defeated. He glanced at the framed photograph on his desk, a painful reminder of what he had lost, and quickly turned it face down, unable to bear her gaze any longer. With a trembling hand, he picked up his phone and called Elena, his personal assistant, a desperate search for a solution to the chaos that consumed him. "I need another nanny," he said, foregoing any greeting, his voice stripped of its usual formality. "Tomorrow, Mr. Mendoza? It's 3 in the morning," Elena replied, her voice surprisingly clear for the hour, a testament to her unwavering professionalism. "You think I don't know that?" he snapped, harsher than he intended, the frustration and lack of sleep bleeding into his words. "I'm sorry, Elena. I haven't been sleeping." "I understand, sir," she said, her voice compassionate, though her professional tone never wavered. "But we've exhausted all the premium nanny agencies in the city. Perhaps we should consider—" "What?" Ramiro asked, impatient, despair creeping in at the lack of options. "My niece just moved to the city from Oaxaca. She has experience with children, though she's never worked well, for someone like you." Ramiro let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Someone like me," he repeated, the irony thick in his voice. "You mean a disaster of a father who can't get his own sons to sleep through a single night?" "I meant someone of your standing, sir," Elena clarified tactfully. "Your lifestyle? Your expectations?" "Her name is Jéssica," Elena continued, pressing on. "She's simple, but she has a gift with children. She worked at a daycare in Oaxaca for years. As for her references, I can vouch for her personally. She's like a daughter to me. She studied child pedagogy, though she couldn't finish her degree due to financial problems." Ramiro ran a hand through his hair, disheveling it further. Under any other circumstances, he would never consider hiring someone without a flawless resume and a battery of exhaustive interviews. But he was so desperate, so close to the edge, that any possibility no matter how unusual, felt like a sliver of hope. Bring her in the morning, he conceded finally, resignation heavy in his voice. First thing, 8 o'clock sharp, not a minute later. At 8 o'clock the next morning, as Ramiro reviewed contracts in his office with forced concentration, Gabriel, the butler, announced the arrival of Elena and her niece. Send them in, he ordered, without looking up from the documents, immersing himself in the world of business where he felt more secure. Elena's heels clicked against the polished marble floor, followed by softer, almost imperceptible steps. When Ramiro finally raised his eyes, he saw a young woman who seemed utterly out of place in the grandeur of his home. She wore simple jeans, an unadorned white blouse, and her brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore no makeup, save for a subtle hint of gloss on her lips. But what truly captured his attention were her eyes, large, expressive, a deep amber color, holding an unusual warmth that seemed to illuminate the room, radiating a serenity he hadn't felt in a long time. Mr. Mendoza, I'd like to introduce my niece, Jéssica Ramírez, Elena said with a formality that contrasted with the situation. Good morning, sir, Jéssica greeted him, a slight accent revealing her southern origins, her voice soft but firm. Thank you for seeing me. Ramiro rose and extended his hand mechanically, surprised by the firmness of her grip. Elena told me about your experience with children, he said, studying her with the analytical gaze he reserved for potential investments. Do you know why you're here? Jéssica nodded with a calm that disarmed him. My aunt explained that your sons have trouble sleeping. They're 4-year-old twins, Elio and Enzo, Ramiro confirmed, a hint of bitterness in his voice. And trouble sleeping is a euphemism. They haven't had a full night's sleep in months, which means neither have I. They've run off 3 professional nannies before you. He expected to see apprehension in her face, but instead, he saw only a quiet resolve. I'd like to meet them, she said simply, without a trace of doubt. Ramiro raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her confidence. Follow me, he replied, leading the way up the stairs, a strange mix of curiosity and hope stirring within him. As they ascended the marble staircase, he found himself evaluating her from a new perspective. She wasn't the type of person he would normally hire. No connections, no polish from expensive schools, no wardrobe that screamed, I belong here. And yet, there was something undeniable about her presence, something comfortingly authentic that stood in stark contrast to the artifice that surrounded him. Before opening the door to the twins' room, he stopped her with a gesture. I should warn you, he said in a low voice. They're having one of their difficult mornings. The last nanny left yesterday, and it's made them even more unsettled. Jéssica smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face with unexpected warmth. Children have good reasons for their behaviors, Mr. Mendoza, she replied, with a wisdom he hadn't expected. They just need someone to discover them. Ramiro opened the door to a scene that looked like a battlefield. Toys were scattered like the aftermath of a storm. Bed linens had been furiously torn from the beds. And in the center of the chaos stood the twins. Their small faces were red and swollen from crying, 2 miniature versions of himself with the same dark hair and intense eyes, though at that moment their eyes were glassy with tears, reflecting a pain he knew all too well. Ramiro braced himself for the usual reaction, the shock, the concern, or the condescending pity that he'd grown accustomed to from previous nannies. But Jéssica did something entirely unexpected, something that caught him so off guard it stole the words from his mouth. She sat down on the floor, right where she was, crossing her legs with a startling naturalness, as if finding oneself in the eye of a hurricane was the most normal thing in the world. "Hello," she said softly, her voice a sweet, calming melody, entirely devoid of authority. "My name is Jessica. I love trains. Do you like trains?" The twins, stunned by this strange adult who had joined them on the floor instead of trying to scold or lift them, momentarily paused their sobs. Their eyes, though still wet with tears, now held a flicker of curiosity. "We have a big train," Enzo said after a moment, pointing to a corner where an elaborate toy railway lay, a creation that mirrored their inner world. "You do?" Jessica replied, her interest genuine, her voice alight with enthusiasm. "Would you show me how it works? I would love to learn all about your railway." To Ramiro's astonishment, Elio, the more impulsive of the two, got up and took Jessica's hand, guiding her toward the train set with a confidence he had never shown a nanny before. Enzo followed quickly, drawn in by her gentle curiosity. Within minutes, the three of them were sitting around the track, Jessica asking detailed questions about every car, every miniature building, and every small detail of the world the twins had so carefully constructed. She showed a genuine interest that completely captivated them. Ramiro remained frozen in the doorway, watching the scene with a mixture of bewilderment and something else. Something he couldn't quite name. The sobbing had ceased entirely, replaced by enthusiastic explanations and the occasional crystal clear laugh, a sound he hadn't heard in months. Jessica looked up, and her eyes met his. For a fleeting instant, something passed between them. A silent recognition, an inexplicable connection that transcended words and circumstance. "We'll be all right, Mr. Mendoza," she said, her gentle tone disarming him completely. "You can leave us if you have work to do. Don't worry about us." She was a stranger, a young woman from Oaxaca, with no impressive credentials. Yet Ramiro found himself nodding, trusting her instinctively, as if some invisible force compelled him. "I'll leave them in your hands," he replied, surprised by the sudden lightness in his chest, as if an immense weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "I'll be in my study if you need me. Don't hesitate to call." As he walked down the stairs, Ramiro heard something he hadn't heard in what felt like an eternity. The clear, carefree laughter of his sons, a sound that echoed through the mansion like a melody of hope. He stopped, his hand on the banister, letting the sound wash over him, savoring every note. Perhaps, just perhaps, Elena had been right about her niece. A small spark of hope ignited in his heart. The day passed with an unusual tranquility in the Mendoza mansion, a calm Ramiro couldn't remember experiencing. From his study, he could occasionally hear laughter and animated chatter, sounds that had been absent for far too long. He found himself distracted from his video conferences, his gaze drifting toward the door as if he could see through it to where his sons were with the new nanny. In the mid-afternoon, unable to contain his curiosity, he decided to casually walk by. He found them in the vast garden, under the majestic shade of a century-old ahuehuete tree. Jessica had spread a blanket on the perfectly manicured lawn, and the three of them were sitting on it, focused on what appeared to be an art project. "Daddy, look what we're doing!" Elio exclaimed upon seeing him, his voice brimming with an enthusiasm that made Ramiro's heart ache with a bittersweet joy. Ramiro drew closer and saw they were painting stones they had collected from the garden, transforming them into colorful, fantastical animals. Jessica says that in Oaxaca they make alabrijes, Enzo explained, carefully pronouncing the new word. We're making stone alabrijes. They're beautiful, Ramiro said, genuinely impressed by the creativity their small fingers had managed under Jessica's patient guidance. It's a technique I learned from my grandmother, she explained, looking up, her eyes bright with pride. The children have a natural talent. They just need the right guidance to let it bloom. Her eyes met his again, and he felt that strange connection once more, as if she could see past his facade as a successful businessman to the weary, vulnerable man hiding behind it. Would you like to join us? She asked, offering him a paintbrush with a smile that held a silent challenge. Ramiro hesitated. He had 3 more video conferences scheduled, documents to review, multi-million-dollar decisions to make. Daddy, please, Elio pleaded, with an insistence he couldn't ignore. Just for a little while, Enzo added, his voice soft and imploring. Ramiro surprised himself by unbuttoning the cuff of his shirt and sitting down on the blanket. Just for a little while, he conceded, taking the brush she offered. Their fingers brushed for a brief moment, and a spark of something new and unexpected passed between them. The little while turned into an hour, during which Ramiro Mendoza, the feared real estate shark of Mexico, completely forgot about his business. He clumsily painted a stone into the shape of a jaguar, his focus absolute. The sound of his son's laughter as they compared his lopsided creation with their own superior works was the most beautiful sound he had heard in months, a balm for his tormented soul. When he finally remembered his commitments and rose to leave, he felt inexplicably light. Thank you, he said to Jessica, the sincerity in his voice surprising even himself. I haven't seen them this happy in a long time. She simply nodded, her gaze conveying a calm wisdom he was beginning to deeply appreciate. The real test will be tonight, she replied pragmatically. Sleep is sacred, for them and for you, Mr. Mendoza. Dinner passed with the same usual peace. The twins, normally restless at the enormous dining table, ate without protest, animatedly telling their father everything they had done with Jessica. She had excused herself to eat in the kitchen with the staff, despite Ramiro's invitation. It's best to establish clear boundaries from the beginning, she had explained gently. It's important for the children to understand my role. When it was time for bed, Ramiro went upstairs with a mixture of hope and skepticism, remembering the nightly battles of the past few weeks, the inconsolable crying, the desperate pleas, the utter exhaustion. He found Jessica sitting quietly between the 2 beds, reading a story in a melodic, enchanting voice that seemed to weave a spell of calm in the room. The twins, already in their pajamas, with their teeth brushed, a miracle in itself, listened with rapt attention. Ramiro lingered in the doorway, not wanting to break the spell. And the brave little rabbit told the moon, I am not afraid of the dark, because I know you will always be up there, watching over me with your silver light, she intoned, her voice thick with tenderness. Enzo yawned, his eyelids growing heavy. Elio had already snuggled into his pillow, fighting to keep his eyes open. The moon smiled down at the rabbit, Jessica continued, her voice now a melodic whisper, almost a lullaby, and wrapped him in a gentle embrace of light, like a sparkling blanket to keep him safe until dawn. Ramiro held his breath as he witnessed the impossible. His restless, sleepless twins were surrendering peacefully to sleep. No tears, no struggle, just the natural rhythm of exhaustion after a day full of life. Jéssica continued the story for a few more minutes, ensuring they were both deeply asleep before she softly closed the book. She gently tucked the blankets around each boy and stood up silently. Only then did she notice Ramiro, watching her from the doorway. Their eyes met in the dim glow of the nightlight, a look that needed no words. He felt an intense emotion rise in his throat, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and something deeper he didn't dare acknowledge. He gestured for her to join him in the hall. "How?" he whispered, his voice full of awe. "How did you do it?" Jéssica smiled, a tired but deeply satisfied smile that lit up her face. "I tired them out," she answered simply. "They needed to burn off all that pent-up energy, all that anxiety. Children express with their bodies what they can't put into words. 3 professional nannies couldn't do this," Ramiro murmured, glancing back at his peacefully sleeping sons. "Perhaps they were too busy being professional," Jéssica suggested, with no malice in her tone. "Sometimes children just need simplicity. They need to feel safe and loved, not managed." Ramiro truly looked at her then, in the soft light of the hallway. She wasn't conventionally beautiful, like the high society women he usually associated with, but there was a light about her, an authenticity and a purity that was more captivating than any manufactured perfection. "You'll stay, won't you?" he asked, and was startled to hear the vulnerability in his own voice. "I mean, the position is yours, if you want it." Jéssica seemed to consider it for a moment, as if weighing something more than just a job offer. "I'll stay," she finally answered, her voice firm. "The children need me. I feel like I have a purpose here." "Me too," Ramiro thought, though he didn't dare say it aloud. "I need you too." "Good," he said instead. "Helena will show you to your room in the staff wing. Unless you'd prefer, we can prepare a room for you near the children, if you feel it's necessary for your work and comfort." "The staff wing is fine," she replied firmly. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Clear boundaries are important for everyone." Ramiro nodded, respecting her professionalism and her decision. "Of course. We'll discuss the terms of the contract tomorrow. Salary, days off, benefits, whatever you need." Jéssica stopped him with a soft gesture, a delicate but meaningful interruption. "Mr. Mendoza, it has been a long day for everyone," she said, her voice gentle but persuasive. "Perhaps you should rest as well. We should take advantage of the fact that the children are asleep. It's a moment of peace we ought to cherish." There was a kindness in her reproach that could disarm even the most seasoned negotiator, a quality Ramiro was beginning to deeply appreciate in her. He found himself smiling, a genuine smile that hadn't graced his face in a long time, one that reflected the peace Jéssica had already brought into his life. "You're right," he said, sincerity coloring his voice. "Good night, Jéssica. Thank you for everything." "Good night, Mr. Mendoza," she replied, her voice as soft as a whisper on the breeze. Ramiro watched her walk down the hallway, her simple yet dignified figure a stark contrast against the opulent backdrop of his mansion. It was as if she belonged to another world, a more authentic and real one, perhaps, than his own. A world where simplicity and warmth were the true treasures. That night, for the first time in months, Ramiro Mendoza slept for 8 consecutive hours. not once startled awake by the cries of his children. It was a miracle he attributed entirely to Jessica's presence in his home. When the morning light began to filter through his curtains, a moment of panic seized him. He thought something was wrong, that he had overslept, and something terrible had happened. How could I have slept so long? He wondered in amazement, a strange sensation he hadn't experienced in a very long time. He rose hastily and rushed to the twins' room, his heart pounding, only to find them still sound asleep, their faces peaceful with a tranquility he hadn't seen since before the tragedy that had transformed his home. He leaned against the door frame, watching their rhythmic breathing, a portrait of peace that moved him deeply. A strange feeling washed over him, a mixture of overwhelming relief, immense gratitude, and something else he couldn't, or perhaps wouldn't, identify. Something that had to do with the young woman who had brought this priceless peace to his home. He returned to his room and, for the first time in years, allowed himself the luxury of getting back into bed after waking. Not to sleep, but to stare at the ceiling and reflect on how, in a single day, a stranger from Oaxaca had managed to transform the energy of his home from a place of sorrow to one of serenity. It's too soon to feel hope, he told himself, trying to contain the emotion welling within him. Too soon to let my guard down, to open my heart. But as he listened to the peaceful silence of the morning, a silence that once would have unsettled him, Ramiro Mendoza recognized that something fundamental had shifted inside him. It was a profound and irreversible change, and that change had a name. Jéssica Ramírez, the woman who had arrived to heal his family's wounds, and unknowingly, his own. The following weeks brought a gradual but undeniable transformation to the Mendoza mansion. The innocent twins blossomed under Jessica's attentive and loving care, developing healthy routines that included not only sleeping through the night, but also regular schedules for eating, playing, and learning. Activities that had once been a constant battle. The house, formerly a tense space filled with tears and frustration, now echoed with children's laughter, lively conversations, and a vibrant energy that had long been absent, filling every corner with life and joy. For Ramiro, the most significant change was rediscovering his own sons. With proper rest, his mind was clearer, his patience restored, and his ability to enjoy his time with them had returned. He began to arrive home early from work some afternoons, a thing unthinkable months ago. Drawn by the positive, enriching dynamic Jessica had created with Elio and Enzo. One Friday afternoon, Ramiro returned home to find the main foyer filled with what appeared to be makeshift tents crafted from sheets and cushions, a sight that both surprised and intrigued him. "What is all this?" he asked Gabriel, who appeared with his usual silent efficiency, ever discreet and attentive. "Miss Jessica has organized an expedition, sir," the butler explained, a slight smile betraying his usual composure, a sign of how remarkably the atmosphere in the mansion had changed. "The young masters are exploring the Amazon rainforest, I believe. They are quite excited about the adventure." Ramiro set down his briefcase and loosened his tie, captivated by the scene unfolding before him. Following the sounds of laughter and fictitious animal roars emanating from the living room, he found Jessica and the twins in the main salon, now transformed into a jungle landscape with strategically relocated houseplants. Drawings of animals hung on the walls, and what looked like a waterfall made of blue cellophane shimmered in a corner, creating an immersive, fantastical environment. Dad! Enzo shouted upon seeing him, his eyes bright with excitement. We're in the jungle! I'm a jaguar! Roared Elio, leaping from behind a sofa with a painted cardboard mask, fully immersed in his predatory role. Jessica, kneeling beside what seemed to be a base camp made of cushions and blankets, greeted him with a slightly embarrassed smile, as if apologizing for the organized chaos. I'm sorry for the mess, Mr. Mendoza, she said, though her eyes shone with joy. I promise everything will be back in its place before dinner. Don't apologize, he replied, surprising himself with the spontaneity of his words. It's wonderful. Don't change a thing. And it was. Seeing his son so engaged, so happy, so lost in their world of fantasy, was worth more than any immaculate decor or artificial order he could impose. Come explore with us, Dad, Elio pleaded, tugging on his hand insistently. We need a brave explorer to join our adventure. Before, Ramiro would have found an elegant excuse. He would have promised to join later, knowing full well he never would, and retreated to his office, to his emails, to his adult world where he was in complete control. But something in him had changed, something deep and irreversible. Give me 5 minutes to change, he replied, astonishing both the children and Jessica, who stared at him in wonder. An explorer can't venture into the jungle in a suit and tie, can he? Jessica's eyes lit up with something that looked like approval, a look Ramiro had never seen from her before. For some reason, that look brought him an inexplicable satisfaction, a warmth that spread through his chest. When he returned in jeans and a casual t-shirt he almost never wore, clothes that made him feel more relaxed and authentic, the twins greeted him with shouts of joy, jumping around him with boundless enthusiasm. Jessica handed him an explorer's hat made of newspaper, a detail that made him smile. Welcome to the expedition, Mr. Mendoza, she said, her formal tone a comical contrast to the situation, creating a moment of light-hearted fun. We are about to discover an unknown species of butterfly, so prepare for adventure. For the next hour, Ramiro Mendoza, the man whose competitors trembled before him in boardrooms, crawled under tables, hid behind curtains, and roared like a jaguar chasing his cubs through the jungle of his own living room. When they finally captured the butterfly, a beautiful paper cutout hand-painted by Jessica, he collapsed onto the floor beside the boys, breathless but strangely happy. A genuine happiness he hadn't felt in a very long time. You're very good at roaring, Dad, Enzo commented with professional seriousness, impressed by his performance. The best jaguar, Elio agreed, reinforcing the compliment. Jessica watched them from the side with a smile she tried to contain, but that overflowed in her eyes, an expression of tenderness and admiration. When their gazes met, Ramiro felt a connection that went far beyond simple gratitude for her care of his sons, a connection that was beginning to transcend professional boundaries. Will you join us for dinner? He asked impulsively, feeling an uncontrollable desire to prolong the moment. Jessica seemed taken aback. For dinner? I usually eat with the staff. Please, the twins insisted in unison, as if they had rehearsed the plea, a chorus of childish voices that could not be ignored. Something in Jessica's expression shifted, a momentary vulnerability Ramiro had never seen in her, a crack in her armor of professionalism. If the children insist, she finally conceded, her voice soft, a small smile playing on her lips. It would be a pleasure. That evening, during dinner, Ramiro watched Jessica interact with his sons, a sight that filled him with awe and admiration. The way she listened to them with genuine attention, how she gently guided them to use the correct silverware without embarrassing them, how she turned every small lesson into a fun and educational game. It wasn't just that she was good at her job, there was something more, an authenticity and a warmth he had long found lacking in the people around him, who were often more concerned with appearances than with genuine connection. Why did you choose to work with children? He asked when the twins were distracted by dessert, a curiosity that had been growing in him all day. Jessica considered the question for a moment, as she did with everything, showing a respect for words that was unusual in Ramiro's fast-paced world. Because children live in the present, she finally answered, her voice soft but filled with meaning. They don't have hidden agendas. They don't hold grudges. If they're happy, they show it. If they're sad, they show that too. There's an honesty in them that she trailed off, as if afraid she had said too much, leaving the sentence hanging in the air. That's missing in the adult world? Ramiro finished, understanding perfectly what she meant. She nodded, a silent communication passing between them, a mutual understanding that transcended words. And why did you leave Oaxaca? He continued, genuinely interested in her personal story. A shadow briefly crossed Jessica's face, a hint of pain or regret that Ramiro did not miss. Sometimes we need to start over, she replied, her tone clearly indicating she didn't wish to elaborate. Mexico City offers opportunities, my town doesn't, and I needed a change of scenery, a new beginning. Ramiro recognized the boundary and didn't press, respecting her decision to keep certain doors closed. There was something in her past that Jessica wasn't ready to share, and he, more than anyone, understood the need to keep parts of one's life private, especially when it came to deep wounds. After dinner, when the twins were ready for bed, Ramiro joined the nightly routine for the first time, eager to be part of that special moment. He watched as Jessica read a story in her melodious voice, sang a soft Oaxacan lullaby, and finally blessed each child with a gesture that seemed part tradition, part personal ritual. A small cross on the forehead, followed by a gentle kiss on each cheek. It's to chase away the bad dreams, she explained in a whisper once the boys were fast asleep, revealing the meaning behind the ritual. My grandmother used to do it for me when I was little. They left the room together, walking in a comfortable silence down the dimly lit hallway, a silence that wasn't awkward, but comforting. Thank you, Ramiro said finally, his voice thick with emotion. Not just for getting them to sleep, for everything you've brought into our lives. Jessica looked at him with an intensity that unsettled him, a gaze that seemed to peer into his soul. They are wonderful children, Mr. Mendoza, she said, her voice soft but firm. They just needed someone to truly listen to them, someone to understand them. Ramiro, he said, correcting her gently. Please call me Ramiro when we're alone. She seemed to consider the request for a moment, weighing the implications of that small familiarity, a sign of the trust beginning to blossom between them. Ramiro, she finally tested, and the sound of his name on her lips produced an inexplicable reaction in him, a warmth that spread from his chest, a sensation that made him feel more alive than ever. Jessica, he replied, as if sealing a silent pact, an implicit promise of a deeper connection. They looked at each other for a moment that stretched beyond what was professionally appropriate, an instant charged with meaning and tension. Ramiro had the sudden impulse to step closer, to break the carefully maintained distance between them, to shorten the barrier that still separated them. But Jessica took an almost imperceptible step back, maintaining the formality that characterized her. "You should get some rest," she said, the formality returning to her tone, shattering the spell that had been cast. "The boys want to go to the Chapultepec Zoo tomorrow, and they'll need to be well rested." The spell was broken, but something remained floating between them, a latent possibility, a feeling that could not be ignored. "Of course," Ramiro replied. "In fact, if you don't mind, I'd like to join you." The surprise on Jessica's face was unmistakable, a blend of astonishment and a hint of discomfort. "But you don't work on Saturdays, do you?" she asked, her voice laced with incredulity. "Some things are more important than work," he replied, surprising even himself with the sincerity of his words. It was a revelation, an impulse to prioritize what truly mattered in his life. The smile Jessica gave him then made it all worthwhile, worth canceling the crucial business meeting he had, in fact, scheduled for the following day. It now seemed utterly insignificant. "The children will be thrilled," she said, her eyes shining with joy. "Good night, Robson." "Good night, Jessica." Ramiro watched her walk down the hall, her simple, graceful figure a stark contrast to the ostentatious luxury of his mansion. The image captivated him. Long after she had disappeared from view, he remained motionless, processing the contradictory feelings stirring within him. He had promised himself he would never get emotionally involved again. Not after being left alone with two small children. He had built walls around his heart, taking refuge in work, in responsibility, in the belief that his only duty was to provide for his sons and protect them from pain. And yet, here he was, feeling those walls begin to crack, to crumble, all because of a young woman from Oaxaca who had stumbled into his life by chance, an unexpected force that was changing him. "It's just gratitude," he told himself as he walked back to his room, trying to convince himself his feelings were superficial. Gratitude because she has brought peace to this house, because she has restored calm to my children and to my life. But deep down, Ramiro Mendoza knew he was lying. What he felt when he saw Jessica with his sons, when he heard her speak with that mix of wisdom and simplicity, when he watched the light in her eyes as she smiled, it went far beyond mere gratitude. It was something much deeper, far more terrifying. And by every social rule he had lived by his entire life, utterly inappropriate. And that terrified him most of all, because it meant he was falling in love. The Chapultepec Zoo was a whirlwind of life that Saturday morning, a torrent of joy that stood in stark contrast to the quiet stillness of Ramiro's mansion. Families strolled along the tree-lined paths, their voices and laughter filling the air. Children pointed excitedly at the animals, their eyes wide with wonder, while vendors sold cotton candy and colorful balloons, creating a vibrant, festive atmosphere. Among the crowd, the Mendozas were an unusual sight. An obviously wealthy man, though dressed with a studied simplicity, that attempted to camouflage his fortune. Two identical boys, bouncing with excitement, and a young woman whose simple clothes belied the quiet confidence of her movements, a confidence that flowed from her authenticity. For Ramiro, the experience was almost surreal, a complete break from his insulated routine. He couldn't remember the last time he had visited a public place without the buffer of a VIP section or the discreet presence of bodyguards. He had insisted on driving himself, leaving his chauffeur at home in a sudden quest for normality. Now, surrounded by the lively chaos of the crowd, he felt a mix of discomfort and a strange sense of freedom he hadn't experienced in years. "Dad, look at the monkeys," Elio exclaimed, pulling on his hand with boundless enthusiasm. "They look like you when you get angry," Enzo added with a laugh, causing Jessica to cover her own smile with her hand. "Oh, really?" Ramiro replied, feigning indignation as he scooped Enzo into his arms, joining the game. "And what if the monkey decides to throw you into the moat?" His son's laughter, clear and carefree, drew smiling glances from nearby families. For the first time in years, Ramiro didn't feel like he was being watched as the millionaire businessman, the real estate magnate. He was simply a father enjoying a normal day with his children. The feeling was liberating. Jessica walked beside him, maintaining a professional distance, yet close enough to intervene if the twins became overexcited. Ramiro watched her discreetly, captivated by the natural ease with which she moved through the environment. She wore her hair down today, falling in soft waves over her shoulders. Her simple jeans and embroidered blouse, clearly from her native Oaxaca, were a touch of her culture that made her all the more intriguing. She wore no makeup, save for a hint of gloss on her lips that enhanced her natural beauty. She was so different from the women he was accustomed to, women obsessed with image and appearance. He found her fascinating. "Is something wrong?" she asked, catching him in his observation. "No, nothing," he replied, looking away, slightly embarrassed at being caught. "I was just thinking, you look different today, in a very nice way." A faint blush colored her cheeks, and Ramiro found that natural flush more beautiful than any expensive cosmetic. "Well, it is technically my day off," she explained, her voice soft. "Even if I'm here with you all, I enjoy my time with the boys." "I appreciate you agreeing to come," he said sincerely. "I wouldn't have known how to handle the twins by myself in a place like this. It would have been chaos." She gave him an appraising look, one that seemed to see past his words. "I think you underestimate yourself, Robson," she said, using his name for the first time in that intimate context. "You're a better father than you think. You just needed a little guidance." Something in the way she said his name, with that mix of respect and familiarity, sent an unusual warmth through his chest. The morning passed in a blur of exotic animal exhibits and ice cream melting under the midday sun. Ramiro discovered facets of his sons he never knew existed. Helio's insatiable curiosity about reptiles, Enzo's perfect imitation of a lion's roar, and the way they both competed to impress Jessica with animal facts they had learned from her. "They've been studying a zoology book," Jessica explained, when Ramiro expressed his surprise, her eyes shining with pride. "They're incredibly smart. They just need someone to nurture their curiosity." "You do that," he replied, his tone holding more than just professional acknowledgement. It held a deep admiration. Their eyes met for a brief moment, a silent current passing between them, until the excited shouts of the twins in front of the tiger habitat shattered the spell. At noon, they found a quiet patch of green for a picnic, under the shade of a large, leafy tree. Jessica had packed a basket with homemade sandwiches, cut fruit, and natural juice, having politely refused Ramiro's suggestion of a five-star restaurant. The children need this, she had insisted, her voice gentle but firm. Simplicity, contact with nature. The most expensive things aren't always what's best for them. Now, watching his sons devour the sandwiches on a blanket spread over the grass, with a ravenous appetite they never showed at Michelin-starred restaurants, Ramiro knew she was right. I've never been on a picnic, he confessed, taking a bite of his own ham and cheese sandwich. It was surprisingly delicious. Jessica looked at him, her large, expressive eyes filled with astonishment. Never? Not even as a child? Ramiro shook his head, a shadow of sadness crossing his face. My family wasn't like that. My father believed that success meant distancing yourself from the common, the popular. Parks were for those who couldn't afford private clubs. And do you believe that too? She asked, her tone free of judgment, only genuine curiosity. Ramiro watched his sons, now chasing a butterfly a few feet away, their laughter mingling with that of other children. He looked down at the simple sandwich in his hand, the juice in a plastic cup, the colorful blanket on the grass. No, he answered, with a startling certainty that rose from deep within him. I believe I was wrong about a great many things. The smile Jessica gave him then was worth more than any multi-million-dollar deal. After lunch, while the twins burned off their last reserves of energy at a playground, Ramiro and Jessica sat on a nearby bench, watching them. Thank you, he said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. For what? For showing me this, he replied, gesturing to encompass the park, the children playing, the simple, perfect afternoon. For teaching me how to be a real father. Jessica shook her head gently. I didn't teach you anything, Robson. I only reminded you of what was already there. Sometimes we get so lost in our responsibilities that we forget to simply be present. You're very wise for 28, Ramiro remarked, with a smile. And you, very dense for being so successful, she retorted, a playful glint in her eye. Ramiro let out a genuine laugh, surprised by her audacity. Touché, he said. I suppose I deserved that. A comfortable silence settled between them again as they watched the twins. Jessica, Ramiro began, gathering the courage for something he had been considering all morning. There's a charity gala next Friday. It's to raise funds for schools in underprivileged areas. I was wondering if you would like to accompany us as my guest, not as an employee. His voice was a little strained as he waited for her reply. The surprise on Jessica's face was evident, mixed with an unease he couldn't miss. She stared at the children, though he doubted she was really seeing them. That wouldn't be appropriate, she finally answered, her voice low but firm. Why not? He pressed, though he already knew the answer. She turned to him, her expression serious. Because I am your employee, Robson, because people would talk. It would send a confusing message to the children. And what if I don't care what people say? A sad smile touched her lips. But you do care, Robson, and you should. Your position, your image, they are part of who you are. That's not who I am, he protested, a pang of frustration hitting him. Perhaps not, she said gently, but it defines the world you live in. the world your children will grow up in. I appreciate the invitation truly, but it wouldn't be right. Not for you, not for me, and not for the boys. Before Ramiro could argue, Helio came running toward them, his face alight with panic. Dad, Jessica, Enzo's stuck in the tunnel and he won't come out. The moment was broken. The intimacy dissolved. Jessica was on her feet instantly, all professionalism. Following Helio back to the playground, Ramiro followed, a mixture of frustration at the interruption and a profound admiration for her steadfast dedication. The rest of the afternoon passed without another word about the gala, but the air between them had shifted. Something had irrevocably changed. A line had been drawn, acknowledged by them both, and Ramiro wasn't sure if he should respect it or dare to cross it. A dilemma that tormented him. Driving back to the mansion, the twins were fast asleep in the back seat, exhausted after a day of adventure. The silence in the car was eloquent, heavy with unspoken thoughts and emotions. What you said in the park, Ramiro began, his voice low, so as not to wake the children. About me worrying what people think. It wasn't a criticism, Jessica clarified quickly, her tone soft and understanding. Just an observation, a different perspective. I know, but it made me think, Ramiro said, pausing as he searched for the right words. For years, I've lived my life worried about appearances, about meeting expectations. Mine, my father's, society's. I hadn't realized how much of that I was passing on to my sons, how I was influencing them with my own insecurities. Jessica listened intently, her soft profile illuminated intermittently by the passing streetlights, an image of calm in the midst of his confession. I don't want them to grow up like that, he continued. I don't want them to think a person's value is in their bank account, or their last name, or how exclusive the places they go are. I want them to be free from those shackles. You're a good father, Robson, Jessica said gently, her voice full of warmth. Your sons know you love them. That's what they'll remember, not lessons on social status or appearances. Thanks to you, he replied. Before you arrived, I was so lost, so focused on maintaining control, that I forgot what was essential, what truly matters in life. Love, connection, authenticity. When they reached the mansion, Ramiro insisted on carrying Enzo himself, while Jessica took Elio, a gesture of partnership and affection that spoke for itself. They carried them silently up to their room, changed them into their pajamas, and tucked them in with synchronized movements that spoke of a routine developed together, a choreography of care and love. Leaving the children's room, they paused in the hallway, as they had on so many other nights, a quiet ritual that had become significant. About the gala, Jessica began, trying to pick up their earlier conversation. You don't have to explain, Ramiro interrupted. I understand your reasons, and I respect them. I understand it's important for you to maintain certain boundaries. Thank you, she replied, her voice filled with sincere, evident relief. I know, Ramiro said. They looked at each other in the dim light of the corridor, and he felt that connection again. That silent understanding that went far beyond words, binding them in a profound way. Good night, Robson, Jessica said finally, breaking the moment. Good night, Jessica. Ramiro watched her walk down the hall as he had so many times before. But this time, he was certain his feelings had crossed a line from which there was no return. It was no longer just admiration or gratitude he felt for his children's nanny. It was something far deeper, far more terrifying, and by every social rule he had ever lived by, completely inappropriate. That night, as he stared at the ceiling of his bedroom, Ramiro Mendoza faced an uncomfortable truth, one that struck him with the force of a physical blow. He was falling in love with Jéssica Ramírez, and he had no idea what to do about it, how to navigate the new emotional territory that was opening up before him. On Thursday afternoon, the Mendoza mansion was unusually quiet, a stark contrast to the usual boisterous energy of the twins. Elio and Enzo were out with Gabriel and another staff member at a children's theater show, an outing Jéssica had planned to give them new cultural experiences. The nanny, however, had not gone with them. For the first time since her arrival, she had requested the afternoon off for personal matters, a fact Ramiro could not ignore. He was in his study, trying to focus on the financial reports on his screen, but his mind kept drifting. Jessica's refusal of his invitation to the charity gala still weighed on him. Not the rejection itself, but what it implied. The unbridgeable gap between their worlds, a barrier that seemed impossible to overcome. The chime of the main gate buzzed, pulling him sharply from his thoughts. Minutes later, Elena, his personal assistant, and Jessica's aunt appeared at his study door, wearing a worried expression that Ramiro immediately noticed. "Mr. Mendoza, forgive the interruption," she said, her voice tense. "May I have a word with you?" "Of course, Elena," Ramiro replied, feeling a pang of unease. "What is it? Is something wrong?" She closed the door behind her and approached his desk, visibly uncomfortable. "It's about Jéssica," she began, choosing her words carefully. "I wouldn't normally interfere, but I'm worried." A spike of alarm shot through him. "Is she all right? Has something happened to her?" he asked, his concern obvious. "Physically, she's fine, but—" Elena hesitated, as if weighing the consequences of her words. "She had a visitor today at the apartment we share. A man from Oaxaca, her ex-fiancé." Ramiro struggled to keep his expression neutral, though the word fiancé had landed like an unexpected punch, a visceral blow that was difficult to control. "I didn't know Jéssica was engaged," he said, his surprise evident. "It was a complicated situation," Elena explained. "Raúl is the son of one of the most influential men in their town. The engagement was more of an arrangement, driven by family pressure, a tradition she couldn't easily escape. Jéssica broke it off when she decided to come to the city, to find her own freedom, her own path. But he hasn't accepted it's over. He's still pressuring her to go back." "And why are you telling me this?" Ramiro asked, his tone carefully professional, betraying none of the storm of emotions, jealousy, concern, a fierce need to protect her, churning inside him. Elena looked him directly in the eye, with the frankness he had always valued in her. "Because I've seen the way you look at her, sir," she said softly, but with unshakable conviction. "And I've seen the way she looks at you." Ramiro tensed, unsettled by the direct observation. "Elena, I appreciate your concern, but my relationship with Jéssica is strictly professional." "With all due respect, sir, we both know that isn't entirely true," she replied gently. "I'm not here to judge. Jéssica is like a daughter to me, and I've seen how she has blossomed here, working with you and your children. She has found a purpose." Ramiro remained silent, unable to deny it. "The reason I'm telling you this," Elena continued, "is because Raúl hasn't left. He's pushing her to return to Oaxaca with him. I'm afraid that Jéssica out of loyalty to her family and her roots, might consider it, and that would be a loss for all of us. The idea of Jéssica returning to Oaxaca, vanishing from their lives, created a hollow ache in Ramiro's chest, a fear of loss so intense it surprised him. "What can I do?" he asked, finally abandoning all pretense, his voice laced with desperation. "Talk to her," Elena answered simply. "Jéssica is proud in private. She would never tell you about her personal problems for fear of seeming unprofessional. But right now, she needs to know she has options, that her life here matters, that she is valued for more than one reason." Elena stood, having said what she needed to. "Jéssica will be back in about an hour. She'll be in the back garden, near the greenhouse. She likes to sit there when she needs to think. It's her refuge." After Elena left, Ramiro sat motionless, processing everything. Jéssica, engaged. Jéssica, being pressured to leave. Jéssica, who had brought light and order back into his chaotic life, potentially disappearing from it forever. The thought was unbearable. An hour later, just as Elena had predicted, Ramiro found Jéssica on a stone bench by the small greenhouse. She was wearing jeans and a simple white blouse, her hair loosely tied back, her gaze lost among the rose bushes she herself had helped revive. She looked beautiful and vulnerable all at once, a combination that tightened something deep inside Ramiro's chest. "May I join you?" he asked, approaching cautiously. She started slightly, but nodded, quickly composing herself. "Of course. Are the children back from the theater yet?" "Not yet," he said, sitting beside her, but keeping a respectful distance. "How was your afternoon off?" "Fine," she answered too quickly, her tone guarded. "Just some personal matters to attend to. Nothing important." An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Ramiro knew he had to be direct. "Jéssica, Elena told me about your visitor today," he said finally, watching her reaction. Jessica's face tensed, a flicker of betrayal in her eyes. "She shouldn't have done that," she murmured, her voice a near whisper. "These are personal matters that don't affect my work. I can handle my own problems." "She didn't tell me to gossip," Ramiro clarified, trying to soften the situation. "She's worried about you. And frankly, after hearing what she said, so am I." Jéssica stood, clearly wanting to escape the conversation. "I appreciate the concern, but I don't want my personal issues interfering with my job here." Ramiro stood as well, feeling that if he let her walk away now, something vital would be lost between them. "I'm not speaking as your employer, Jéssica. I'm speaking as someone who—" He paused, searching for the right words. "As someone who cares about you, deeply." She looked at him then, truly looked at him with those amber eyes that seemed to see past every facade he had ever built. "Raul wants me to go back to Oaxaca," she said finally, her voice barely audible, revealing the truth that tormented her. "He says that's where I belong. With him, with my family, with the traditions of my people." "And do you want to go back?" Ramiro asked, dreading the answer. She looked away, toward the roses. "When I came to Mexico City, I was running. From expectations, from a future that others had planned for me." She paused, her words heavy with emotion. "But now, I have reasons to stay. The children, they adore you," Ramiro said, his heart pounding. "We wouldn't know what to do without you." "It's not just about the children," Jéssica replied, gathering her courage to meet his gaze again. "And that's what scares me." The honesty in her words, the raw vulnerability, tore down the last of the barriers Ramiro had tried to maintain. It scares me too, he confessed, because I never expected to feel this again. Because it's complicated and there are 1,000 reasons why it shouldn't work. We can't, Jéssica interrupted, though her voice lacked conviction. I'm your children's nanny. We come from completely different worlds. People would talk. People always talk, Ramiro said, taking a step closer, closing the distance between them. But for the first time in my life, I don't care what they say. The only thing I care about is my children's happiness and yours. It should matter to you, she insisted, trying to reason. You have a position, an image to uphold. My only real responsibility is to my sons, he said, taking another step, and I have never seen them happier than they have been since you arrived. Jéssica, you didn't just teach them how to sleep. You taught all of us how to live again. Tears welled in her eyes. He fought the overwhelming urge to close the final gap between them, to hold her, but he held back, knowing this had to be her choice. I can't offer you a conventional future, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. I can't promise it will be easy, but I can promise that I have never cared for someone the way I care for you. And it isn't gratitude, or just because you're wonderful with my children. It's because of you, Jéssica. Simply you. A tear traced a path down Jessica's cheek. Ramiro hesitated, then slowly raised his hand. When she didn't pull away, he gently brushed the tear away with his thumb. If you decide to go back to Oaxaca, I'll understand, he said, though the thought was a painful twist in his chest. But I want you to know you have a place here, not just as my children's nanny, but as... He stopped, realizing he was moving too fast. As whatever you want us to be. She stood still, processing his words, the warmth of his touch lingering on her cheek. I'm afraid, she finally confessed, not of you, of myself, of wanting something that feels impossible. What's impossible, Jéssica? Ramiro asked softly. She opened her eyes, and in them, Ramiro saw a decision forming, a courage being born. What's impossible is pretending I feel nothing when I'm with you, she answered, her voice trembling but firm. What's impossible is imagining leaving this house, leaving the children, leaving you. The world seemed to stop around them. The garden, the mansion, Mexico City vanished, leaving only this moment suspended between two people who, against all odds, had found something invaluable in each other. Ramiro finally closed the distance between them, leaning in slowly, giving Jéssica time to pull back if she wished. But she remained still, her gaze locked on his, until their lips met in a tentative kiss, like a silent question. Jessica's answer was immediate, her hands rising to his shoulders, drawing him closer. The kiss deepened, transforming into an expression of everything they had held back for weeks. Desire, fear, hope, and a deeper feeling that neither of them was ready to name. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Ramiro rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered, not as an employee, not out of obligation. Stay, because you want to be here, with me, with us. A slow smile formed on Jessica's lips. I'll stay, she replied, sealing her decision with another brief kiss. But we'll have to find a way to make it work. For the children, Ramiro agreed, and for us. The sound of children's voices and approaching footsteps broke the moment. The twins were returning from the theater. Jessica pulled back slightly, but Ramiro took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. "Ready?" he asked, the word carrying a meaning that went far beyond facing the children. Jessica squeezed his hand, her smile lighting up her entire face. Ready. 6 months later, the transformation of the Mendoza mansion was evident to anyone who had known it before. The curtains, once perpetually drawn, now let in an abundance of natural light. The walls, previously adorned with expensive abstract art, were now partially covered with colorful children's drawings, framed with the same care as the collection pieces. And the solemn silence that once dominated the space had given way to laughter, conversation, and the occasional strain of traditional Oaxacan music. But the most profound change was not in the decor, but in its inhabitants. Ramiro Mendoza was finishing a video conference in his study when the door flew open without warning, and two identical whirlwinds burst into the room. "Dad, it's all ready!" exclaimed Elio, jumping unceremoniously onto his lap. "Jessica says we can show you the surprise now," Enzo added, pulling impatiently at his hand. Ramiro feigned seriousness for his colleagues on the screen. "Gentlemen, it seems I have an urgent matter to attend to. We'll continue tomorrow." The executives on the screen smiled with knowing amusement before signing off. Ramiro Mendoza's reputation had changed as much as the man himself. He was still respected for his business acumen, but he was no longer feared for his coldness. The real estate shark, to the surprise of the entire Mexican business world, had been humanized. Allowing himself to be led by his sons, now 5 years old and brimming with healthy energy, Ramiro walked toward the back garden. As he crossed the threshold, he stopped short, awestruck. The entire garden had been transformed into a small Oaxacan village. Colorful lanterns were strung between the trees. Tables draped in hand-embroidered cloths overflowed with traditional dishes. And in the center, a small stage was set for musicians with traditional instruments. Jessica, radiant in a vibrant traditional Oaxacan dress, walked toward him, her smile lighting up her face. "Happy anniversary," she said, standing on her toes to kiss him softly. 6 months since our first kiss. Ramiro wrapped Marisha in his arms, still amazed by her capacity to surprise him. "This is incredible," he murmured against her hair. "How did you organize all of this?" "With a little help," she replied, gesturing to Elena, Gabriel, and the rest of the staff, all dressed in festive attire. "We wanted to celebrate not just our 6 months, but everything that's changed." The twins ran to them, pulling on their hands to show them every detail of the celebration. Ramiro let himself be led, his heart full, as he took in what his life had become. The party was intimate but vibrant. The twins, dressed in small embroidered guayaberas, danced with Jessica, following the steps she had taught them. Ramiro watched them from a table, chatting with Elena. "I never imagined my niece would bring so much happiness to this house," the woman commented with obvious pride. "To you and the children." "She changed everything," Ramiro replied sincerely. "She taught me what truly matters." "You know," Elena continued with a knowing smile, "in Oaxaca, we have a saying, when a soul finds its way back to Piniuchintano, to the light, the entire universe celebrates. Jessica was lost when she came to the city, fleeing the expectations of others. You were lost in your grief and responsibilities, and yet you found each other." Ramiro reflected on her words as he watched Jessica laughing with his sons. The transformation had been mutual. He had offered her a new beginning, away from the traditional pressures of her village. She had taught him how to live again, how to be the father his children needed. When the music shifted to a slower rhythm, Ramiro approached them. "May I have this dance?" he asked Jessica, extending his hand. "I want to dance with Jessica, too," Elio protested. "Me too," Enzo chimed in. Jessica knelt before them with a smile. "I'll dance with your dad first, and then with you two, my princes. How does that sound?" The twins, satisfied with the compromise, relented. As they danced under the colored lights, Ramiro held Jessica close, marveling at how this unassuming woman had rebuilt his entire world from the ground up. "I have something for you," he said, pulling away slightly to take a small box from his pocket. "I was going to wait until after dinner, but I think this is the perfect moment." Jessica looked at him curiously as she opened the box, revealing a beautiful ring with an amber stone surrounded by tiny diamonds. "I chose it because it reminds me of your eyes," Ramiro explained, his voice slightly unsteady. "The first time I saw you, that's what struck me the most. The warmth in your gaze when you spoke to my sons." Jessica stared at the ring, speechless, her eyes welling up. "It's not an engagement ring," he continued. "Not yet. I know it's too soon, and I want to do this right. It's a promise. A promise that I'll be here, patient, until you're ready." "Ramiro," she began, but was interrupted by the twins, who had crept closer and were now staring at the ring with wide eyes. "Are you going to ask her to marry you, Dad?" Enzo asked with total innocence. "Yes!" Elio exclaimed excitedly. "Say yes, Jessica. Then you can be our mom forever." Jessica and Ramiro exchanged a surprised look. They had never spoken to the children about marriage, knowing they had to handle their relationship with care for their sake. "Boys, Jessica and I are," Ramiro began, searching for the right words. "Actually," Jessica interrupted, kneeling to be at their level, "there's something I need to tell you first. All three of you." She looked at each of them, took a deep breath, and continued. "A few weeks ago, I started to feel different. At first, I thought it was just all the excitement in our lives. But then," she cast a special glance at Ramiro, "I went to the doctor yesterday while you two were at school." Ramiro stared at her, hardly daring to hope for what her words seemed to suggest. "In about 7 months," Jessica continued, taking the twins' hands, "you two are going to have a little brother or sister." The silence that followed lasted only a second before the twins erupted in joyous shouts. Ramiro, momentarily frozen in shock, finally reacted, pulling Jessica into an embrace so tight he nearly lifted her off the ground. "Is it true?" he whispered against her ear, his voice thick with emotion. "We're having a baby?" Jessica felt tears streaming freely down her cheeks. "I wanted to find the perfect moment to tell you," she said. "And then you planned all this party, and you pulled out that ring." Ramiro kissed her, a kiss full of promises and future, barely aware of the applause and cheers that broke out around them as the staff understood what was happening. "I think this changes things," he said, when they finally parted, both breathless and smiling. He knelt then, still holding the ring, but this time with a new purpose. "Jessica Ramírez, you have taught me how to be a father, how to be a man, how to be human again. You brought light where there was only darkness, dreams where there was only insomnia, and love where there was only duty. He paused, looking at the twins who were watching, fascinated. The three of us want you in our lives forever. Would you do me the honor of marrying me, of officially being the mother to our children, of forming this family that began the night you stumbled into my broken heart and fixed it? Jessica, radiant despite her tears, nodded before she could find her voice. Yes, she finally answered. Yes, to all of it. The twins joined the embrace as Ramiro slid the ring onto Jessica's finger. The staff applauded, Elena cried discreetly, and the musicians began to play a traditional celebratory melody. A year later, the private beach in Puerto Escondido gleamed under the midday sun. Ramiro, dressed in a white guayabera and light trousers, waited under an arch of tropical flowers. At his side, Elio and Enzo, now 6, stood surprisingly still in their matching small suits, each holding a small cushion bearing a wedding band. Traditional Oaxacan music announced the bride's arrival. Jessica walked across the sand, barefoot and radiant in a lace dress that blended contemporary elegance with traditional Oaxacan details. In her arms, she carried a small bundle wrapped in a hand-embroidered blanket. Lucia, barely 3 months old, slept peacefully against her mother's chest. The ceremony was brief, but deeply emotional. When it was time for the vows, Jessica gently passed the baby into Elena's arms and took Ramiro's hands. A year and a half ago, I walked into your house as just another employee, she began, her voice clear and steady. I was running from an imposed future, searching for my own path. I never imagined that path would lead me to you, to the boys, to this family that is now my home. Ramiro squeezed her hands, visibly moved, and I never imagined that the solution to my son's sleepless nights would be finding love again, he responded. You taught me that second chances exist, that happiness isn't a luxury but a right, and that sometimes what we need most comes from where we least expect it. When they exchanged rings, with the slightly clumsy but enthusiastic help of the twins, Ramiro drew Jessica in for the kiss that would seal their union. As they parted, they both looked at the 3 children who now made up their family. The twins who had finally found the emotional security they so desperately needed, and little Lucia, the living symbol of their love. That night, after the guests had departed and the children were sound asleep, Ramiro and Jessica watched the ocean from the villa's terrace. You know what's ironic? Ramiro commented, wrapping his arms around her from behind. I hired a nanny so my sons could sleep, and I ended up falling so in love that now I have a newborn who wakes me up every 3 hours. Jessica laughed softly, leaning back against his chest. Life has an interesting sense of humor, she replied. I ran away from an arranged marriage in my village, only to end up marrying for love on a beach in Oaxaca. They turned as Lucia's soft cry came through the baby monitor. They exchanged a knowing look. I'll go, Ramiro said, kissing her forehead. You rest. As she watched him walk away, Jessica reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. From nanny to wife, from employee to mother of 3, from a frightened young woman, running from the expectations of others, to a woman who had found her place in the world. And it had all started with a pair of sleepless twins and a widowed millionaire who had forgotten how to live. Some might call it destiny. Jessica preferred to call it a miracle.